No fan of Infantino, no fan of FIFA, but hold the pearl clutching on this, please.
Gianni Infantino wants to sell off parts of FIFA to private members. This was a Times exclusive by Martin Ziegler. He's written a letter to FIFA's various members, making the point that they can join up and get behind the plan, and if they do, there is a financial incentive. This has led to lots of condemnation and anger from various football bodies. There's talk of boycotts. Andy Burnham, the UK's new Prime Minister, has wrote in saying that this is not something that is true to football or he could get behind. We're yet to hear from President Trump, but given it's his son-in-law's brother that's helping to broker the deal, according to Times reports, he perhaps won't take such an anti-stance. Jerry, what's your read on the situation?
Yes, I've been struck by how the world has taken to its fainting couch. All the right people, the media, football fans, the British Prime Minister, all the grand panjandrums of the European sort of media and cultural establishment and government establishment have, taken to the microphones to declare this to be absolutely outrageous, and how dare they Americanize our sport? How dare they try to make money out of our sport? This is more corruption. Infantino's corrupt, Trump's corrupt, the Kushners are corrupt. What a terrible thing. Let's get out. Let's have nothing to do with FIFA. Let's return football to its pure state. I gotta say, I find all that to be an absolute complete balderdash. Look, I'm not a big fan of Gianni Infantino. Don't like many of the innovations he's done. There are long-standing sort of suggestions that not all is always conducted above board at FIFA. I'm familiar with all of those things. But look, football is the most popular form of entertainment in the world. We just watched the World Cup, and I, as a fan, have watched many, many, many of those 104 games. It's an astonishing spectacle. People around the world love it. Even Americans watched it in quite great numbers right now. When you have a very popular thing, where people are demonstrated willingness to pay large amounts of money to buy players, to buy clubs, to buy tickets to go to games. It's generally speaking, when you have something as popular and in demand as that. This is after all, we live in a world dominated by economics. When you have something in demand as that, it represents a great opportunity to invest in it. And I think what Infantino is doing is coming up with a plan which would result, yeah, no doubt he'll get rich from it. Oh, I'm sorry, that happens, right? Okay, powerful people get rich when they come up with ideas that make money out of things that are popular. And other people will get rich. But the potential for this is to pour billions, tens of billions of dollars, pounds, euros into global football, and to make it an even better, more impressive spectacle, event, competition than it's ever been. Look, you look at these people who complain about, oh my God, how dare you bring money into sport? Look at the way in which English football. I'm old enough, Katie, much older than you, and a football fan. I can remember going to watch football matches in England in the 1970s and the 1980s. And let me tell you, it was not a very pleasant experience. And part of that was because there was no money. We were watched in stadiums with no seats, where, people, by the way, kind of routinely took part in violence or suffered appalling consequences as a result of very poor infrastructure. We watched pretty mediocre players kicking lumps out of each other, right? Somebody came along, including some people who, run this company, and said, actually, it's a very popular sport. Why can't it be better? Why can't we do a better job with it? Why can't it look better? Why can't it be better? Why can't the experience be better? And they poured a lot of money into it. And guess what? The Premier League became the most dynamic, the best league in the world. This is the way, I'm sorry, this is the way the world works. And it works out. Yeah, of course, there are consequences that not all of us like, but it works out, generally speaking, when you open up something to the opportunity for market forces and investment. Surprise, surprise, the market works pretty well and ends up improving the product. And that's what we've had with football in the last 30 years in my lifetime. And these people who complain about this, oh my goodness, how dare you bring money into football, and how the terrible corrupt people want to bring capitalism into football. We want to bring football back to its roots and to make it pure again. Yeah. What they want to do is they want kind of football that, where football's played in stadiums like cowsheds, on football fields like kind of rural car parks, played by blokes who, had to work down the pub in their spare time to get by. Look, again, no fan of Infantino, no fan of FIFA, but hold the pearl clutching on this, please, and look at the idea of how sport can work, and don't just instantly say the idea of bringing some more money into a sport is necessarily going to make it worse when the evidence over decades is precisely the opposite.
Look, I'm not going to claim to know as much about football as you, Jerry, but isn't the slight complaint and concern here this idea that you look at the World Cup, the fact that, the final, $15,000 tickets, how expensive the World Cup was a whole, that strange halftime show that was taking it closer to the Super Bowl. And if they do this plan, it takes it further and further away from the fans and more into these kind of commercialization and interests. When already football's in a fairly good, you don't need this for it to not go back to, the scenes you're depicting of, no food at halftime and, awful stadiums or not even stadiums at all.
There was food at half time. You could get good old fashioned, sausages and meat pies and things like that. Look. I do think the price. That's a separate debate there. The pricing of the tickets to the World Cup. First of all, they were market prices. They were, despite all the fears that people wouldn't pay and wouldn't go, people did pay. All the stadiums, pretty much every single game was sold out. So that wasn't quite right. I do think the pricing was. I do think the pricing was excessive. I think they could have made more tickets available in the way that Premier League tickets or other professional sporting events. Look at them. Look, everybody. Oh my God, American football or American sports. Oh God, we don't want to look like that. American sports stadiums sold out every week, especially football stadiums. They're not exorbitantly priced. You can get a ticket to go and see a good team for a reasonable amount of money. Yeah, we can argue about the details of the ticket pricing and things like that, but the idea that you shouldn't attract investment into the world's most popular cultural activity, if you like, and certainly spectator cultural activity, the idea that you shouldn't be able to bring investment into that to improve it, yeah, for people to make money. But again, that is how the markets work. Just seems to me, and again, you can have rules. You can say, look, you have to make a certain amount of tickets available, at reasonable prices. You don't want to price people out, of course, completely out of being able to go and see games. You can have other rules that capitalism works by some extent by being regulated, but it's just this principle, this very sort of, I hate to say it, Katie, but this, maybe I've lived in America too long, with this sort of instinctive English opposition to the idea of people making money out of something and making the product better in the process. No, no, no. If I have a choice between privatizing, between giving people the opportunity to spend money, to invest their own money, and to make money in a product and make that product better, or nobody gets to make any money but the product continues to be crap, then this classic English view is, oh, I'd much rather take the crap than risk anybody getting rich.
Sure, but do you trust Infantino and the Kushner brothers to be the ones to do this?
First of all, Infantino. Again, I'm not a fan of Infantino, but he has put on a couple of very successful World Cups. And by the way, FIFA has made a lot of money, which of course it claims it's pouring back into football, which it does to some extent. Secondly, yeah, there are the Kushners. Josh, who's involved in this, does have a pretty good track record in investing. But thirdly, the whole point of this is to open up the sport, potentially to open it up at the national level in the way that's been opened up at the club level, to people who want to invest. And whatever you think of Infantino or the Kushners or anybody of those people, there are lots of investors with money who want to spend it and invest it in the sport, and they've done it in the Premier League. Again, I know a lot of them are not popular with regular fans, but they have contributed to making the Premier League the best football league in the world, to making the stadiums better than any stadiums pretty well anywhere in the world, to making the experience a generally very, very much better one, and an appealing one. So yeah, I don't trust Infantino particularly, but I do trust in the market, and I think the idea that the market will not produce more money, a better quality, and overall a significantly improved product, I think the chances are very good that it will.